Now, the view from Wigan Pier. Jeff Nuttall follows the tracks of an old Etonian across the north of England.
In the dirt that is sent up from the pits, there is a certain amount of broken coal, and unemployed people spend a lot of time picking it out of the slag heaps. That scene stays in my mind as one of my pictures of Lancashire. The dumpy, shawled women with their sacking aprons and their heavy black clogs, kneeling in the cindery mud and the bitter wind, searching eagerly for tiny chips of coal.
During the 1930s, there was a great vogue for putting the condition of England under the microscope. J.B. Priestley with his English Journey, the documentary filmmakers, mass observation, all of them trooped north. Seeing the pit headgear motionless and mill chimneys smokeless, they nodded sagely, saying, something must be done. George Orwell's contribution to this was The Road to Wigan Pier, an account of life at the bottom of the heap in the old industrial towns of Lancashire and Yorkshire. The book was published 63 years ago, but to this day, Orwell in Wigan is not forgotten.
It was a close-knit community. You don't want any outsider coming in and sticking their nose in. It's our business, we'll get on with it.
He weren't interested in the working class, he was interested in the cash. My mother said to my father, he's doing it for money or something. He's skint. She said he won't write anything good about the town.
It does not deserve the sort of treatment that it got from Orwell. It'll take some shaking to alter my view that he came to Wigan predetermined to knock it as much as he could, and I don't thank him for that at all.
The Road to Wigan Pier wasn't Orwell's idea. It was a commission from Victor Gollancz, who'd been impressed by Down and Out in Paris and London. So, in January 1936, Orwell left London and headed north with a whacking £500 advance from his socialist publisher. He meandered through the Midlands, staying in cheap lodgings, until he fetched up in Wigan on the doorstep of a union activist, Jerry Kennan. His son Harry takes up the story.
I was upstairs. My brother come up and said that there's a London fella come up, London chap, and he wants our dad to take him round Wigan. He had a letter of introduction from someone down south, and he just knocked on the door and they were just surprised. He had to stay at my mother's.
He made himself at home when he came. He seemed a bit, had like peculiar habits with him and overeating, you know, and I said to Mr. Kennan, I said, never bring anyone here again like that. He was more a vegetarian, I think I should say myself. He didn't eat very much. I know I said to Gerald, I said, never bring anyone here like that again.
My father hadn't been forewarned that Orwell was coming up. Just a complete surprise. Orwell told them what he was after doing while they was having the tea. And my father said, well, after we've eaten, I'll take you down to Wigan.
Kennan became Orwell's minder, showing him a town hard hit by the Depression and introducing him to locals like James Fairhurst.
The town was pretty poor, and we with gas lamps, so with thick fogs and things like that. And even in the sunlight, you'd see the rays of sun coming down. You could see the coal dust dancing in the sun. You know, it was a pretty grim place.
Down below is the River Douglas, on which Wigan stands, and it used to be appalling. There's no other word for it. In fact, even until a few years ago, it used to run different colours depending on which mill upstream was operating which pollutant. It was said that you could walk across it, there was so much filth in it.
You wouldn't walk very far before you saw the headgears of the pits. Everywhere you'd see the headgears of the pits. You'd see the miner walking around with a muffler and a cloth cap on, and wearing clogs. Orwell made a great play of that.
On the outskirts of the mining towns, there are frightful landscapes where your horizon is ringed completely round by jagged grey mountains, and underfoot is mud and ashes, and overhead the steel cables where tubs of dirt travel slowly across miles of country. I remember a winter afternoon in the dreadful environs of Wigan. All round was the lunar landscape of slag heaps. The canal path was a mixture of cinders and frozen mud, crisscrossed by the imprints of innumerable clogs. It seemed a world from which vegetation had been banished. Nothing existed except smoke, shale, ice, mud, ashes, and foul water.
When Orwell came to Wigan, he took lodgings at 72 Warrington Lane with the Anderson family. The house, 2 up, 2 down, toilet out the back, was basic but neat and clean, possibly too clean for Orwell. After a week, he moved to a shared room above a filth-encrusted, fly-blown tripe shop in the slum part of the town. Harry Kennan and his father looked on and wondered.
Darlington Street itself, it just wanted knocking down. You know, they'd have the day. Cockroaches in the houses. You know, take the old piece of oilcloth up and there were cockroaches flying from in here and running there. Couldn't get out quick enough. Straight to the old Wigan baths, have a good shower. It was shocking.
There were a table and the Manchester Evening Chronicle was the evening newspaper then. And believe me, there's no tablecloth. They were put one Evening Chronicle on, and then the next day another went on the top of it. I've seen it, where there must have been a thickness of 10 or 12 Evening Chronicles been put on.
A shared bedroom which stank like a ferret's cage, dust on the furniture so thick it was like fur, a diet of bread and marge with black thumbprints, and an overflowing chamber pot under the breakfast table. All these details he faithfully recorded.
He certainly didn't like living there, but he said he was going to be hard. He wanted to see things really at the worst.
He was really showing the worst part of it, but the majority of people, they were not like those people in the tribe shop. They were, my parents were honest, decent people who were trying to bring the children up honestly, trying to keep clean, trying to do the best they could in adverse conditions.
The place I live in is a block of dwellings, and the canal is surrounding it, 3 sides, with boats passing now and again and dragging all kinds of stuff up and smelling and one thing and another. We have the smoke from the mills and smoke from timber yards. It's not very healthy for the children. But if we want to go to the lavatory, we've got to walk out and to the end of the landing and choose the lavatory that's allotted to us. If no one's on it, it's all right.
As you walk through the industrial towns, said Orwell, you get lost in labyrinths of little brick houses, blackened by smoke and festering in planless chaos around miry alleys and little cindered yards, where there are stinking dustbins, lines of grimy washing, and half-ruinous WCs. Some people hardly realize that decent houses exist. They look on bugs and leaking roofs as acts of God.
The conditions of my house. My chimney stack was demolished on the 5th of November. You can see the sky through it, with no electric light whatever.
And the cockroaches, well, till lately, they've been eating us alive. Go to next door but one and look up to the roof and you'll see a big man...
But Orwell wasn't on some casual Wigan walkabout. members of the National Unemployed Workers Movement were mobilised to give him the guided tour. Ellis Firth was one of them.
I took him to some houses. There was nearly all one up and one down. And I took him in this number 1 house we went in. Well, his first job, he said, get hold of that tape. He had a tape measure. I said, how we measured it. So it took all particulars what was in. I heard him say, well, what have they done to deserve this and live in this place? I heard him say that. It reminded me of a detective. He was trying to find that missing link.
So long as the housing shortage continues, the local authorities cannot do much to make existing houses more livable. They can condemn a house, but they cannot order it to be pulled down till the tenant has another house to go to. And so the condemned houses remain standing and are all the worse for being condemned, because naturally the landlord will not spend more than he can help on a house which is going to be demolished sooner or later.
From his stinking lodgings above the tripe shop, Orwell tramped the Wigan streets. But here was no discreet mass observing, no casual eavesdropping. This was a former recruit of the Empire Police. James Fairhurst and his friends were on the receiving end.
They saw this gaggling man come along, and very scruffy, a pair of Oxford bags, very wide, and very tousle-looking appearance, but he had a beautifully modulated voice, completely at odds with his appearance. And he started asking them questions, and he had a list of questions that he was asking, and they thought that he was a government snooper, trying to catch people out on the means test. He was just asking them where they worked, what did they do, what their occupation was, you know, what sort of money they were getting. He was really making an honest attempt to meet people and interview them as to what it was like in Wigan.
My husband is out of work. We get £2 to keep 7 of us. 3 and 6pence for Francis, and 3 and 6pence for Catherine. 3 shillings each for the other children. Well, I don't think that they can get much nourishment on that.
Porridge for breakfast. Sometimes potatoes in the jackets for dinner. Sometimes we'd have them mashed and a drop of milk put through it. And then tea, porridge again.
Some of the girls are worse clad than the boys for cold weather. On coldest days they wear thin cotton frocks. Some of them seem to cough all the year round. You know, I really think the cause is that they have wet feet so often. Some of them even have canvas shoes in the wettest of weather.
Somewhere the sun is shining, so honey, don't you cry. We'll find a silver lining, the clouds will soon roll by.
Orwell spent most of February 1936 in Wigan, and it was sheer hard graft. Mornings in the reference library, afternoons touring houses, mills and factories, evenings taking notes at political meetings in Wigan Market Square, and odd times in the Bolshevik Club under the Co-op. He was becoming a familiar figure. Frank Taylor.
When George Orwell came to Wigan, I was friendly with the son whose family had the Army and Navy stores next door to the tribe shop. And a bloke came, and George said, that bloke's George Orwell is a writer, and he's writing about the terrible conditions that English people lived in compared with the regulated Russian method. The information was, you see, he was on a commission from Left Boot Club, which meant actually he was being paid by Russia.
The gangling, scruffy stranger, a friend of Uncle Joe, Well, was he not constantly at political meetings? And did he not frequent the Communist Club? And was he not seen in the company of the enemy within, the red menaces paid, some thought, by Russia to foment trouble? The miners. James Fairhurst.
The miners were looked down on. They used to call them the dirty earthworms. When we went to school, I always remember that on the occasions that you had to give the headmaster your father's occupation, there was always a look of distaste on his face at the word miner as a result of the 1926 strikes, because of the miners were looked upon as troublemakers.
Orwell admired the miners. Our civilization, he said, is founded on coal. The machines that keep us alive and the machines that make the machines are all directly dependent on coal. But during his time in the north, he heard enough to convince him that the miners were treated like the dirt they dug in.
1936, there was an appalling disaster here, an explosion in which I think it was 5, it may have been 7 men were killed. The following shift had to go down to bring out the bodies. My father's payslips indicate that they were not paid for that day's work because they didn't get coal, they got bodies. So they didn't bring out what they should have brought out, so they had a day's pay docked from their wages.